Okay, last video for today, calculating inverse trig functions. So in this video I'm going to specifically give you problems like this where it says, all right, the inverse sine or the arc sine of something else is equal to what? Now remember, inverse trig functions or arc trig functions are sort of going backwards. They're asking what angle. If it's just normal trig functions, that's kind of like asking what's the ratio or what value. Alright, so if I go from the inside out here, which is what I want to do, I want to start here and I want to kind of work my way out. What's the value of cosine of 30? Well, if you remember back to your chart, right, your chart of special angles, sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent of 0, 30, 45, 60, and 90 degrees, you'll remember that these angles right here, right, the cosine of 30 is radical 3 over 2. So let me bring that up here a little bit. So the cosine of 30 degrees is radical 3 over 2. Alright, and the next question is, alright, what angle is the sine radical 3 over 2? So the sine of some angle is radical 3 over 2. I want to know what that angle is. Now obviously there are like an infinite number of answers to this, but let's just kind of go through the path of least resistance. We'll keep our constraint pretty simple, and we'll just kind of worry about like the first quadrant, positive angle in the first quadrant. So the sine of what angle is equal to radical 3 over 2? The sine of what angle is equal to radical 3 over 2? Well, the answer is 60 degrees. The sine of 60 degrees is radical 3 over 2. So this answer is simply 60 degrees. The answer to this question is an angle, and that angle is 60 degrees because the cosine of 30 is equal to the sine of 60. The cosine of 30 is equal to the sine of 60. We talked about that symmetry right there. And that comes back to, you know, special right triangles and how cosine and sine are defined as opposite adjacent over hypotenuse, things like that. Moving on. Let me bring this chart down with me. Alright, next one I'm going to be in radian mode here. So the sine of pi over 2 is on the inside. We're going to work from the inside out. So the sine of pi over 2, the sine of pi over 2 is over here. Sine of pi over 2 is 1. So if we work from the inside out, I get the cosine of what angle is equal to 1? That's the question. Right, whenever you see arc cosine, that's inverse cosine. And that answer is going to be an angle. It's asking what angle is the cosine 1? And that answer, of course, is right here. The cosine of 0 degrees. The cosine of 0 degrees is 1. So your final answer would be 0 degrees. Let me write that up here. 0 degrees. Moving on. Next one, if we work from the inside out, this time I have a cotangent. Cotangent is 1 over tangent. So you probably, you know, depending on what class you're in, what your teacher has you doing, you might not even necessarily need to have these 3 rows in your little chart here, your special angle chart, but these are your reciprocal functions. And the way that I'm getting all of these values right here is I'm just basically flipping over all of these values that correspond with it. So the cotangent of 60 degrees is 1 over, this is 1 over the tangent of 60 degrees. Well, the tangent of 60 degrees is radical 3. So 1 over radical 3 we need to rationalize. That's where we get radical 3 over 3 from. And you can see that down here. Cotangent of 60 degrees is radical 3 over 3. All right, so I'm really wondering the arctan of radical 3 over 3. So what angle, the tangent of what angle is equal to radical 3 over 3? That's the question. So the tangent of what angle is radical 3 over 3? Oh, here it is. The tangent of 30 degrees is radical 3 over 3. So this would be 30 degrees. That's my answer. At this point, let me go back to this problem here. I started in radians, so I should probably end in radians. Instead of saying 0 degrees, let me say 0 radians. Whatever you start in, you should end in the same thing. This one started in degrees, and I gave the answer in degrees, radians, radians, degrees, degrees. Do a couple more here. All right, this time I'm going to give you a degree. I'm going to tell you that I need to find the secant of 0 degrees. Secant of 0 degrees is 1 over the cosine of 0 degrees. Cosine of 0 degrees is 1, so the secant of 0 degrees is 1. I want the arc sine of 1. So the sine of what angle is equal to 1? Well, that answer is over here. It's 90 degrees. And that's your answer. Last one. And in this last one, we're back to radians, so my answer should be in radians. And let's see, I've got 10 pi over 6. Okay, so I might need to graph this thing. 10 pi over 6, if I remember. We're in something over 6, so this would be 0. This would be pi over 2, or 3 pi over 6, 6 pi over 6, 9 pi over 6, 12 pi over 6. And this angle is 10 pi over 6, so I'm going to start, I go 3, 6, 9, and then one more. So it stops right there. So that's my angle 10 pi over 6, it's the fourth quadrant angle. And the measure, or the value rather, of the sine of that, we'll just go back to this idea of reference angles, right? Reference angle here, if the theta is 10 pi over 6, the reference angle is the difference between that and the x-axis. So it's 2 pi over 6. The reference angle is 2 pi over 6, or just pi over 3. So I really want to know the sine of pi over 3. What's the sine of pi over 3? Well, the sine of pi over 3 is radical 3 over 2. So arc cosine of radical 3 over 2. But before we continue, it's probably worth noting that all students take calculus. So the sine of 10 pi over 6 is this is in the fourth quadrant. This is a fourth quadrant angle, and only cosine and secant are positive in the fourth quadrant. So this is actually a negative radical 3 over 2. So my question now is, the cosine of what angle is equal to negative radical 3 over 2? And that answer is going to be in quadrant 2. So if I go down to my chart here, the cosine of what angle is negative radical 3 over 2? Well, the cosine of pi over 6 is radical 3 over 2. The cosine of pi over 6 is radical 3 over 2. But I want a negative radical 3 over 2. And again, we're going to keep this simple. If you wanted to keep going around and around in the circle, there would be an infinite number of these answers. But I'm just going to put an answer. The simplest answer is going to be in quadrant 2. So what angle gives you a cosine that is negative radical 3 over 2 in quadrant 2? Well, let's think about this. Pi over 6 would be my reference angle. So if this were 6 pi over 6, and this were 0, and this were 3 pi over 6, my angle would have to be quadrant 2. The reference angle would have to be pi over 6, which means my angle would have to be 5 pi over 6. In other words, the cosine of 5 pi over 6 is radical 3 over 2 with a negative out in front of it. So the answer to this question is 5 pi over 6 radians. And I'm done. And that pretty much takes care of all the videos for today. And that last one was just all about, making sure that you are aware of what, arc means and kind of working from the inside out. So thanks for watching.